Hello everyone, happy 4th of July. I'm Longer James. In the spirit of the 4th of July and freedom, feel free to call me whichever you wish. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a bit of a constitutional scholar and a linguist who loves looking up the definition and origin of words that are new to him. To celebrate Independence Day, I want to go over the history of the founding of the US, specifically talking about the Declaration of Independence and the Second Amendment, given that the Declaration of Independence isn't really talked that much about in our country, and the Second Amendment, which is very controversial, with some people wanting to amend and repeal it, while others fight for it strongly, and I'm going to be talking about them in the best way I know how, through language, because without a well-defined language, everything means nothing. First of all, Independence Day is about our independence from Great Britain, which was the colonist domestic government at the time, but do not let that confuse you from what our Declaration of Independence was for. See, the Declaration of Independence had not one, but two purposes. The first being a declaration of the colonists' independence from the British government, basically a declaration of war against them, and the second was a foundation for the new government to be, which is now known as the United States of America. Despite the Declaration of Independence not being a legal document like the United States Constitution, it sets up the spirit of the U.S. Constitution, which is the law of the land, which is just as, if not more important, than the words in the U.S. Constitution itself. Some courts use the spirit of the law rather than the word of law itself to make up their rulings. A simple example would be something like traffic laws, which the spirit of those laws is to keep people safe on the road. So although someone may break the wording of a traffic law like speeding, if someone is speeding safely, like 5 to 15 miles per hour over the speed limit with no other cars around them, a court will likely not convict the person of a speeding violation as they weren't driving dangerously. The spirit or foundation of the U.S. Constitution is specifically written in the Declaration of Independence. It says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evidences a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security." That's pretty long, so I'll summarize it for you. Basically, what it's saying is that we are all created equal, the people have unalienable rights, the government is supposed to protect those rights, and only have just power when the people consent. Otherwise, they are exerting tyrannical or unjust powers, and if they do exert such unjust powers onto the people, they have the right to alter, abolish, or even overthrow their own government to make a new one. And the people should use wisdom before trying to change the government, and it should not be changed flippantly. This is why we have things in our Constitution like the amendment process, which requires a 3/4 or more state majority, which is very hard to get. Since the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, we've only had 17 more since 1791, which is really only 15 because 2 of them canceled each other out, the 18th and 21st Amendments, to ban alcohol and then repeal that ban. The people also have a right and duty to alter, abolish, and overthrow their own government, which is why the people have a right to keep and bear arms and why it shall not be infringed. Speaking of the right of the people to keep and bear arms, I'd like to break down the Second Amendment because the debate surrounding it is largely grounded in ignorance, and I'd like to shift that to a place where we can debate out of a place of knowledge and morals rather than misinformation. Starting with the full text of the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Pro-gun control groups usually just cite the a well-regulated militia part and ignore the rest entirely, and pro-2A groups will just cite the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed part. Neither really acknowledges the middle part, being necessary to the security of a free state part, which all of it is kind of important, and I'll explain why as I break it down. Starting with a well-regulated militia part, well-regulated does not mean what a lot of pro-gun control people think it means. It doesn't mean something heavily regulated by the government. In the 17 to 1800s, well-regulated meant in good working order to perform its intended task. In terms of the militia, it means well-organized, well-armed, well-disciplined, and there's also a few other things I'll go over later. But in general, it means in good working order to perform its intended task. When used to describe a watch, a well-regulated watch was one that acted as a true sundial, not going too fast or too slow, desynchronizing with the true time. It did not mean a watch that the government put a bunch of laws on how to manufacture it properly. In context with the militia, a well-regulated militia was one that was in good working order to perform its intended task of providing security to a free state, which is mentioned in the second part, being necessary to the security of a free state. The Declaration of Independence describes the opposite of a free state, a state of tyranny or despotism, and provided a list of 27 things the King of Great Britain did. You can see them all here. There's a lot of them. And it stops right there. A well-regulated militia requires 5 key things: being well-manned, well-armed, well-supplied, well-trained, and most importantly, be made up of free people, not strictly controlled by the government. The colonist militia was not controlled by the British government. I will discuss those at length in another video, as it really does deserve its own video, and I don't want to make this one too long, so please subscribe and click the bell for notifications if you want to see that video. And if you learned anything so far or like this type of content, please leave a like and comment, as well as let me know what you want more of. Back to the second part of the Second Amendment. The being necessary to the security of a free state part describes the intended task of the militia, as well as the importance of the right of the people to keep and bear arms, because the people are the militia. Specifically, looking at the words being necessary to is a type of argument, explanation, or rationale, which in linguistics terms, that's called a prefatory clause. Think of the phrase that being the case or that being said, and then the statement following it is an active statement, which is what the third and fourth part of the Second Amendment is. Also note, an argument, explanation, or rationale does not mean it is required for the active statement. For example, overweight people are typically unhealthy due to lack of exercise and overeating. That being the case, overweight people should first go on an exercise and diet routine to become healthy, and if that doesn't work, seek professional medical help. You could completely remove the explanation part of why overweight people are unhealthy and just say they should exercise and have a good diet, and it would still be equally valid, which explains why a lot of the pro-2A people leave out the a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state part and continue on with the active statement. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Looking closer at the third part of the Second Amendment, the right of the people to keep and bear arms specifically tells us who the right to keep and bear arms belongs to, which is the people. A large portion of the pro-gun control groups thinks the people can only have a right to keep and bear arms if they are in a well-regulated militia, but looking up any quotes from the Founding Fathers will quickly disprove that notion. Also, if the people are to form well-regulated militias that are well-armed and well-trained, they must first have the right to keep and bear arms to begin with, because if they don't have any arms, how can they train with something they don't have? It's like asking new grads to have a 5+ year work experience for an entry-level position. It's putting the cart before the horse and makes no sense. We've also already had a court case on this going all the way up to the Supreme Court in the United States, ruling the right to keep and bear arms is an individual right, not requiring well-regulated militia membership or service in the Heller versus District of Columbia case in 2008. There is also a lot of debate over the arms in which the people can and can't bear. I will cover this later in this video. Moving on to the fourth part of the Second Amendment, shall not be infringed, is the action statement being prescribed to the third part of the Second Amendment, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. I see and hear this part get debated a lot, what does and doesn't constitute an infringement, and believe this also needs clarification as well. First of all, I'd like to differentiate the difference between an infringement of the right of the people to keep and bear arms and an infringement of the Second Amendment. There is no such thing as an infringement on the Second Amendment. There is only a binary of violation and non-violation, and any infringement on the right of the people to keep and bear arms is a violation of the Second Amendment. It's like a rule at an art gallery to not touch any of the pieces in the art exhibit, and someone touches it anyways, and while they may not have broken the art piece, they still violated the rule of not touching them. Now, what constitutes as an infringement? The definition of infringe is to act so as to limit or undermine something, in this case, the shall not statement, or to encroach on. Looking at some of the synonyms, like the words erode, diminish, means to weaken, damage, or lessen gradually or slowly. It does not mean to ban absolutely. So all of the people who say we just want to put some limits and we aren't going to ban all arms, that still constitutes an infringement by definition. Also, things like the National Firearms Act of 1934, Gun Control Act of 1968, and National Firearms Act of 1986 are all gradually weakening of the people's right to keep and bear arms. Those, by definition, are infringements as well. I will back up this claim with the definition of arms, the spirit of the law in the Second Amendment, and the Declaration of Independence. The word arms is defined as weapons and ammunition or armament, and the definition of armament is military weapons and equipment. Military weapons and equipment. The arms that the people have a right to keep and bear are all arms, since the government cannot infringe on the right to keep and bear arms, not just muskets like some pro-gun control groups like to argue, which, by the way, were military weapons at the time. Some people may question, even fully automatic guns and nukes? Yes, even fully automatic guns and nukes. The spirit of the Second Amendment says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed because it is necessary for them to form well-regulated militias and provide security to a free state. And the spirit of the Declaration of Independence says the people have a right to alter, abolish, or overthrow a tyrannical government. And in order for the people to fight a tyrannical army, the people would need equal or even better arms than the army. Even Joe Biden confirms that the people have need for F-15s, which are fighter jets, and maybe nuclear weapons to use on the U.S. government should the U.S. government go tyrannical.
If you want to think you need to have weapons to take on the government, you need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons.
To end this video, I'd like to leave you guys with a quote from one of our founding fathers, Tench Cox, a Pennsylvanian delegate. Who are the militia? Are they not ourselves? Is it feared, then, that we shall turn our arms, each man against his own bosom? Congress have no power to disarm the militia. Their swords and every other terrible implement of the soldier are the birthright of an American. The unlimited power of the sword is not in the hands of either the federal or state governments, but where I trust in God, it will ever remain in the hands of the people. So there you have it. Thank you guys for listening to my TED Talk about the Second Amendment and the Declaration of Independence. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. And don't forget to hit the bell for notification for when I drop the video explaining the 5 key components of a well-regulated militia, and if the National Guard and Naval Militia even meet those requirements. I'll see you guys in the next video. Be free, America.